Leah's room was quiet, save for the soft rustle of leaves outside her window. The moonlight bathed everything in a cool, ethereal glow, casting long, twisted shadows on the walls. For a moment, the stillness felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. It was midnight, and the night was thick with the weight of silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, it began. At first, it was nothing more than a whisper, a fleeting sound she might have mistaken for the wind, a soft murmur in the distance, like the rustling of tree branches in the dark, too faint to decipher. But when she tried to focus, it slipped away, vanishing like a dream upon waking. Leah shook her head, telling herself it was nothing, just the natural noises of the night. After all, who would expect whispers in the dead of night? But then it came again, a night later, and then again the next. Every night, at the same time, the whispers returned, each time clearer, stronger. They were no longer the sound of wind or random noises from the house settling. They were voices, real voices, layered with emotion she couldn't quite understand. Leah lay on her bed, her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The soft whispers danced around her, like the ghost of her grandmother, her mother, even voices she couldn't place, voices of people long gone, faces she couldn't remember but somehow knew. The names they spoke were strange, almost foreign, yet there was something deeply familiar about them. It was as if the voices were speaking from a place long lost in time, drawing on memories buried deep in her soul. "Who is it?" she whispered to the darkness. But the voices never answered her directly. They didn't tell her what to do, what path to follow, or how to change her life. They didn't give her commands or guidance. They were showing her something far more profound. They were showing her who she truly was. The first few nights, Leah had been confused, disoriented, even frightened by the whispers. She didn't understand their meaning or purpose. It seemed impossible that she could hear them so clearly, so intimately. She thought she was imagining it. Perhaps the stress of life, the weight of her responsibilities, had finally taken its toll on her. But as the nights went by, it became impossible to ignore. The whispers weren't just in her mind, they were real. The more she listened, the more she understood. They weren't just distant echoes, fleeting sounds that faded as quickly as they came. No, these voices were tied to something ancient, something deeply ingrained within her. It was as though they were coming from a place within her that she didn't know existed, a place so old and forgotten it felt like it belonged to a different world. The whispers felt like fragments of something that had always been there, waiting to be uncovered. Leah was not certain when she began to understand their meaning, but over time, she noticed that the whispers weren't random. They weren't vague or meaningless. They were deliberate, thoughtful, speaking in riddles at times, but always with an underlying message. You are more than you know. At first, she thought it was a simple echo, a reassurance in the midst of uncertainty. But as the days stretched into weeks, it began to dawn on her that the voices were showing her the way, guiding her gently toward a truth she wasn't ready to accept. The whispers were not instructions or commands. They were not telling her what to do. They were revealing something more intimate, more profound. They were revealing who she was. The girl who had grown up in the quiet town, who had always felt like an outsider, who had always thought she was nothing special. She was wrong. She wasn't just a girl, living a simple life. There was more to her than she had ever realized. A heritage, an ancient connection to something far beyond what her life had ever been. She had felt disconnected from the world, as though she didn't quite fit. And yet now, the whispers seemed to be pulling her closer to something, to a truth she had always known but had never acknowledged. One night, the whispers grew stronger, more urgent. As Leah closed her eyes, lying still in her bed, she felt the air around her thicken, charged with an electricity she couldn't explain. The moonlight seemed to glow even brighter, bathing her room in an otherworldly light. The voices were clearer now, and they filled the room, surrounding her like an invisible presence. You are the descendant of those who walked before you, a voice said softly. It was familiar, like her mother's, but older, tinged with wisdom and sorrow. You carry the blood of the ancients. The wisdom of generations flows through you, waiting to be unlocked. Leah's heart raced in her chest, the words striking deep within her. What did they mean? Ancestors? Bloodlines? The whispers spoke of something she had never been told, something her mother had never mentioned. The idea of an ancient heritage was foreign to her. Her family had always seemed so ordinary, so grounded in the present. They had never spoken of any grand lineage, no forgotten legacy. She was just Leah, nothing special. But the voices were insistent. They spoke of a hidden history, of strength and wisdom passed down through generations, a lineage that stretched back beyond what she could imagine. They spoke of powers that lay dormant within her, waiting to be awakened. The whispers didn't explain what this power was or why it had remained hidden. They didn't give her any answers, not yet, but they made her feel a sense of belonging, as if her entire life had been a preparation for something greater, something she couldn't fully grasp yet. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the voices grew faint again. The air around her relaxed, and the tension in the room dissipated. Leah lay still, the weight of what she had just heard settling in her mind. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her thoughts were a blur. She wanted to cry out for answers, but she knew they wouldn't come, not yet. Leah sat up in bed, the moonlight still casting its cold glow across her room. Her mind raced, her heart heavy with the implications of what she had just experienced. Who were these voices? What did they want from her? Why had they chosen her? She had so many questions, and yet she knew that the answers would not come easily. The whispers had shown her something she wasn't ready for, something bigger than her small life. The realization hit her in waves, crashing over her like a storm. She was not just an ordinary girl. She was tied to something ancient, something vast, and the voices were her connection to it. Leah closed her eyes, her mind drifting in a sea of questions. But one thing was certain: she could no longer ignore the whispers. She had to listen, to understand what they were telling her. She was about to embark on a journey, one that would lead her to the truth of who she really was. The whispers had only just begun. Leah had never known her father. His presence was a shadow in her life, a fleeting memory woven into the quiet corners of her mother's stories. His name was rarely spoken, and when it was like a ghost that slipped between her mother's lips, soft, barely audible, as though it were too fragile to hold on to. Her mother would smile at the mention of him, but it wasn't a smile of warmth or joy. It was a smile touched with sorrow, a kind of sadness that seemed to bloom quietly in the stillness, like a flower that grew out of season, its petals delicate, yet steeped in the cold of winter. Leah had never asked her mother much about him. Perhaps it was because she had always known that the answers would be vague, incomplete, or painful. There was always a silence that hung in the air, heavy with unspoken words. Instead, Leah had grown up with her mother's stories that spoke of her ancestors, of a time long past, a time that seemed like it belonged to another world entirely. The tales were full of grandeur and mystery, of ancient warriors who fought not only with swords but with the power of the earth itself, of priestesses who could speak with the winds, and healers who used knowledge passed down from generations before. These stories were woven into the fabric of her childhood, tales of people who were powerful, noble, and wise. But there was always something strange about these stories. They felt like they belonged to someone else, someone far removed from the life that Leah had come to know. Her mother's voice would often falter as she spoke of the past, as though she were reaching for something just beyond her grasp, something that had slipped through her fingers. The whispers, however, began to change all of that. They weren't like the stories her mother told. They weren't simply words in the air, floating like dust. They were vivid, real, alive in a way that none of her mother's stories had ever been. At first, Leah thought it was just her imagination playing tricks on her, as it often did when she was deep in sleep. But the whispers didn't fade with the morning light. They lingered, echoing through her mind like an ancient song, haunting and beautiful. They came to her in her dreams, but these were not like any dreams she had ever had. These dreams felt different, like a door had opened to another world. In these dreams, Leah found herself standing in the midst of a great battlefield. She could feel the weight of an ancient sword in her hand, its hilt warm and familiar, though she had never held it before. The ground beneath her feet trembled with the force of an approaching army. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and the sound of clashing steel. She was surrounded by warriors, tall, broad-shouldered men and women dressed in armor that gleamed under the rising sun. Their faces were set in expressions of determination, their eyes burning with the fire of battle. But it wasn't the warriors who called out to her. It was the whispering voices, faint at first, but growing stronger with each passing moment. "You are one of us, Leah," they said. "You are the blood of the ancients. Do not forget." Leah's heart pounded in her chest. The dream shifted, and she was no longer standing in a battlefield. Now, she was surrounded by tall stone columns, the remnants of a long-abandoned temple. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of herbs, and the soft flicker of torchlight danced on the ancient walls. In front of her stood a woman, her face serene yet filled with sorrow. Her hands were outstretched, holding a bundle of herbs that seemed to glow with a light of their own. The woman's eyes met Leah's, and there was something familiar in her gaze, something that pulled at Leah's soul. "You carry the wisdom of the ancients within you," the woman whispered, her voice soft like a lullaby. Leah tried to speak, to ask who the woman was, but no words came. Instead, she felt a flood of images, visions of lives lived long before her own. She saw flashes of rituals, of firelight dancing on the faces of people who had once worshipped in that very temple. She saw moments of joy and grief, of love and loss. It was a tapestry of memories, not her own, but ones that belonged to those who had come before her. The voices whispered again, but this time, they were not just words. They were memories, fragments of a past that had been lost to time. "The past is not gone, Leah," they said. "It lives within you, waiting to be remembered." Leah awoke with a start, her breath quick and shallow. The morning light filtered through her window, but the weight of the dream clung to her like a shadow. Her heart was still racing, and her mind was a blur of images and whispers. She sat up, trembling, as the words echoed in her ears. "The past is not gone. It lives within you, if tended for dew." She didn't know what it meant, but she felt a deep, unsettling truth in it. It was as though something inside her had been awakened, something ancient, something powerful. But the more she thought about it, the more confused she became. What was this power, and why had she been chosen to hear these whispers? In the days that followed, the whispers grew more frequent, more insistent. Each night, they came to her in her dreams, painting vivid pictures of her ancestors. Some were warriors, others were healers, but all of them shared something in common: a strength, a purpose, a connection to something greater than themselves. The whispers didn't just tell her stories, they were showing her pieces of her own past, of a life she had never lived, but that now felt like a part of her very being. The more she saw, the more she began to understand. Leah's mother had never spoken of these things. She had never mentioned the true depth of their family's history, the bloodline that stretched back through generations, connecting them to warriors and healers, to those who had once walked among the stars. It was as though the past had been deliberately hidden from her, tucked away in the shadows of her mother's smile, and in the silence that followed the mention of her father's name. But now, with each passing night, the whispers unraveled the story that had been kept from her for so long. "You are the last of your line," the voices whispered one night. "The blood of the ancients flows through you, but it is hidden. You must seek it out, Leah, or it will be lost forever." The urgency in the whispers left Leah shaken. She didn't understand why she had been chosen, why the voices were calling to her now, but there was something undeniable in their presence, something powerful that demanded her attention. Every night, she felt herself drawn deeper into the past, into a world of ancient warriors, mystics, and healers who had once walked the earth. It was as though they were calling out to her, urging her to find them, to uncover the secrets that had been buried for so long. As the days passed, Leah began to notice subtle changes within herself. She felt stronger, more attuned to the world around her. The whispers were no longer confined to her dreams. They followed her throughout the day, soft and constant, like a gentle breeze. She would hear them while walking through the streets, while sitting alone in her room, and even when she was surrounded by people. The voices had become a part of her, a constant presence that she could no longer ignore. And then, one night, the whispers gave her a new task, a challenge that would take her beyond the confines of her home, beyond the safety of the world she had always known. They spoke of a place, a hidden temple deep within the forest. There, the voices said, you will find what you seek. There, you will reclaim your heritage. The thought of leaving the safety of her home filled Leah with a sense of dread, but she knew it was inevitable. The whispers had given her a path to follow, and she could not ignore it. The past had called to her, and now it was time to answer. With a final glance at her mother's peaceful face as she slept, Leah made her decision. She would leave. She would follow the whispers, no matter where they led her. For in those voices, she knew there was something more, something that would reveal not only who she was, but who she had always been meant to be. The echoes of the past were calling her, and it was time for Leah to answer. The days stretched into weeks, and with each passing night, Leah began to feel the changes within her more profoundly. At first, they were subtle, fleeting sensations that left her wondering if she was imagining them. But soon, it became impossible to ignore. The whispers, once distant and fragmented, seemed to open something inside her, a door she hadn't even realized had been closed for so long. And once that door creaked open, it didn't shut again. Her dreams had grown more vivid, more intense, and every morning she woke with the lingering feeling that she had been somewhere else, somewhere far beyond the ordinary world. It wasn't that her dreams were fantastical, filled with strange creatures or impossible scenarios. No, the dreams were much more real than that. They felt like memories. Memories of a life she had never lived, of people she had never met. But they weren't just memories, they were pieces of a puzzle, each fragment falling into place, revealing something greater, something she had never known about herself. The world around her also seemed to shift. The trees outside her window, the wind that passed through the air, the sunlight filtering through the branches, they all felt more alive. They spoke to her in ways she couldn't explain. Her senses were heightened, and she could hear the soft murmur of the earth beneath her feet, the rhythm of the wind that whispered secrets as it passed through the forest. She felt as though the entire world was somehow attuned to her, aware of her presence. It was as if she had stepped into a world that had always been there, but one she had never truly seen before. And now, everything was different. It was during one of these evenings, as the sky deepened into twilight and the soft golden light of the setting sun filtered through the trees, that Leah began to truly understand. She was sitting on the balcony of her house, gazing out at the forest that stretched endlessly behind it. The trees, tall and ancient, swayed gently in the wind. They moved with purpose, as though they were not just reacting to the breeze, but reaching for something. Leah's eyes narrowed as she watched them. It was a strange sensation, as though they were beckoning her, guiding her towards something just beyond her sight. A strange tug pulled at her chest. It wasn't fear or anxiety, but something deeper, something familiar. She closed her eyes and listened. The whispers were there, growing louder, swirling around her like a soft chorus, almost as if the trees themselves were singing. The sound of the wind grew stronger, and the leaves rustled in a rhythm that matched the beat of her heart. She opened her eyes again, and the world seemed sharper, clearer, like the veil between the seen and unseen had been lifted just enough to show her a glimpse of what lay beyond. Leah. The voice came through the whispers, low and soothing, like the sound of rain on a quiet night. It was familiar, yet not. It felt like it came from all around her, yet also from deep inside her own being. She turned her head, half expecting to see someone standing beside her, but there was no one. Only the trees, the fading light, and the ever-present whispers. "You are not alone, Leah. You never have been." The words were soft, but they resonated deep within her. She could feel them vibrating through her chest, like the hum of a tuning fork, resonating with something deep inside her. Her heart stilled, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to fall silent. The trees, the wind, the whispers, everything stopped as though they were waiting for her to absorb the meaning of those words. She blinked, taking a deep breath, trying to steady herself. There was a part of her that wanted to reject what the voice was telling her. After all, she had spent most of her life alone. Her mother had always been there, yes. But her father had been nothing more than a shadow, a distant memory she had never been able to grasp. The life she had known had been small, quiet, and solitary. It had been a life defined by absence, an absence that had shaped her, made her feel disconnected, incomplete. But now, standing in the quiet twilight, those words echoed in her mind, and the weight of them began to settle in. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone. The realization was both comforting and unsettling. How could that be? How could she have spent so much of her life feeling this absence, this emptiness? And yet the truth was that something had always been with her, something she had never seen, never understood, but which had been guiding her all along. "Who are you?" Leah whispered into the silence, her voice shaky, but full of a deep yearning. "What do you want from me?" For a long moment, there was no answer. The world around her seemed to hold its breath, waiting. And then, slowly, the whispers began again. Softer this time, like a lullaby drifting on the wind. "We are your ancestors, Leah. We are the ones who have walked before you. We are the ones who gave you life, and we are the ones who have been with you, waiting for you to hear us." Leah's breath caught in her throat. The realization hit her like a wave, crashing over her with a force she wasn't prepared for. Her ancestors, the very people whose stories had been passed down through the generations, whose lives had been woven into the fabric of her own. They were not just tales from her mother's lips. They were real. They had lived, fought, loved, and died. And now, their voices were reaching out to her. "We have always been here, Leah," the voice continued, now clearer than ever. "In the whisper of the wind, in the rustle of the leaves, in the pulse of your heartbeat. We are in you, and you are in us. The blood of the ancients flows through your veins." The weight of the words pressed down on her, and she felt something stir deep within her, something primal, something that had been asleep for far too long. She closed her eyes again, her heart racing, her mind reeling with the sudden rush of understanding. She wasn't just the girl without a father. She wasn't just the girl who had grown up in a quiet house, feeling disconnected from the world. She was the heir to something far greater than herself, a legacy that stretched back through the ages, a legacy of power, wisdom, and strength. The whispers, the dreams, the strange pull she had been feeling, it was all part of the same thing. Her ancestors were reaching out to her, showing her who she was, who she had always been. The life she had known had been just a small part of the story. There was so much more waiting for her, so much more she had yet to uncover. She stood up from the balcony, her legs trembling beneath her. But there was a sense of determination growing inside her. The connection to her ancestors, to this unseen world, was growing stronger by the day. She could feel it now, as if they were all around her, as if they were standing beside her, guiding her towards something she had not yet understood. She was no longer just a girl in a small house, looking out at the trees. She was part of something far bigger, a story that stretched back through time, and she had a role to play in it. The wind picked up again, swirling around her like a gentle embrace, and the trees swayed once more, as if nodding in approval. The whispers faded, but their presence remained, lingering like a promise in the air. Leah took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She was not alone. She never had been. The past had always been with her, and now it was time for her to step forward, to uncover the truth of who she was, and to embrace the legacy that had always been hers. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft, golden rays across the room. Leah woke with a sense of clarity she hadn't known before. Her mind, usually fogged with the uncertainties of the day ahead, felt sharp, focused. The whispers had been relentless in her dreams, and their message was clear. "Find the stone. It will guide you." The words echoed in her mind as she sat up, her feet touching the cool floor. She had never been one to believe in signs, at least not in the way that many did. But something about the whispers, about their urgency, had stirred something deep within her. It was as though they were calling to her, reaching through the veil of her ordinary life, pulling her toward something far beyond her understanding. The stone, she had no idea what it was or where it could be, but she felt an undeniable pull, a deep, magnetic force that urged her forward, away from the life she had always known. Her mother had spoken of the ancient oak tree that stood at the heart of the forest behind their house. It was a tree of legends, of stories that had been passed down through generations. It was said to be the symbol of strength and endurance, its roots deep within the earth, as if it were connected to the very heartbeat of the world. But those stories had always seemed distant to Leah, something more symbolic than real. Now, though, as the whispers filled her head once again, she knew with a certainty she couldn't explain that the oak tree held the key. The stone, whatever it was, had to be there. She stood, her body feeling lighter, as if some invisible force was guiding her even as she moved. Without hesitation, she dressed in layers of worn clothes. She didn't know how long she'd be gone, or what she'd find, but she knew she had to go. She wasn't sure what awaited her in the woods, but there was no turning back, not now. The forest was just as she remembered, its tall trees casting long shadows across the path. The scent of pine and earth filled the air, grounding her with every step she took. But today, the woods felt different. There was something in the air, a palpable energy that hummed beneath the rustling of leaves. It was as if the very earth itself had come alive, waiting for her, calling her forward. The whispers were now more than just faint voices in her mind. They were here, all around her, echoing through the branches, vibrating in the earth beneath her feet. The stone is close, Leah. Listen to your heart. She could almost hear their voices in the breeze, urging her onward. The deeper she went into the forest, the more alive everything seemed. The trees, the wind, even the ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with an energy she couldn't fully comprehend. The quiet, peaceful woods she had once known felt like a place filled with secrets, ancient and powerful secrets waiting to be uncovered. The further she walked, the more intense the pull became, drawing her like a magnet toward the center of the forest. The whispers grew louder, and she could feel them in her chest, a rhythm that matched her own heartbeat. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a sense of destiny, of something larger than herself that was unfolding with every step. And then, as if guided by an invisible hand, Leah found herself standing before the oak tree. It was even more magnificent than she remembered, its thick trunk rising high above her, its branches spreading wide like arms embracing the sky. The air around it seemed to shimmer with a kind of reverence, a silence that felt almost sacred. Leah stopped for a moment, her breath catching in her throat as the whispers faded into a soft hum. "You have found it," they whispered, the words full of approval. Leah glanced around, her heart racing. She knew she was close. She could feel it now, like a presence in the air, a force that was both gentle and powerful. She knelt down beside the tree, her fingers brushing the cool, damp earth. Her eyes scanned the ground, searching for something, anything that would tell her where to look. It wasn't long before she spotted it, a small, smooth stone, resting on the ground at the base of the oak's gnarled roots. It wasn't much to look at, just an ordinary-looking stone, round and dark. But when she reached out to touch it, she felt a jolt of energy surge through her. The stone was warm in her hand, almost alive. It wasn't just a stone, it was something more. She could feel its pulse, its rhythm, as though it were calling to her, connecting with something deep inside her. The moment her fingers closed around it, a wave of silence washed over the forest. The whispers stopped, everything fell still. For a brief moment, there was no sound, no movement. Leah held the stone tightly, her breath shallow as the world around her seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the beating of her own heart, steady and strong, filling the silence like a drum. She closed her eyes, feeling the stone's energy seep into her, flowing through her veins like fire, like blood, like life. It was as if the stone itself was alive, a part of her, and she was a part of it. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the moment ended. The world around her shifted, as if a veil had been lifted. The whispers, which had been silent for that brief moment, began again, but now they were different. They were clearer, stronger, as though they were no longer distant voices, but something intimately tied to her. "You have found it, Leah," the voices said, the words flowing through her like a river of memories and emotions. "The stone is the key. It will guide you on your journey, but only if you are willing to listen." Every tension of round, Leah opened her eyes, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. The stone, still warm in her hand, seemed to hum with quiet power. She didn't understand everything, didn't know what exactly she had found or what it meant, but she knew this was the beginning of something important, something that would change everything. The stone was more than just an object. It was a connection to something ancient, something vast, and she had no choice but to follow it wherever it led. Her fingers tightened around the stone, and she felt its warmth grow, filling her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. The whispers had led her here, to this moment, to this stone, and now it was up to her to listen, to understand, and to follow where it would guide her. The world around her seemed to shift once again, as if the entire forest were breathing with her, alive with the same energy she felt coursing through her veins. She looked up at the great oak tree, its branches swaying gently in the wind, and for the first time, she felt truly connected to it, to the earth beneath her feet, to the whispers in the trees, and to the long, ancient line of ancestors whose voices had led her here. She stood, her heart still pounding in her chest, her hand clutching the stone tightly. The journey ahead would not be easy. She didn't know where it would lead her or what challenges she would face. But she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer just Leah, the girl without a father. She was something more, now something connected to the past, to the earth, to the stone in her hand. And she would follow where it led, no matter what lay ahead. With one final glance at the oak tree, she turned and began her journey, the whispers guiding her every step. The stone in her hand, a constant reminder of the path she was meant to follow. Leah awoke with a start, the weight of the stone still in her hand, its cool surface grounding her to the present. The world around her came back into focus slowly, like the fog lifting from the surface of a lake. She blinked, trying to make sense of what had just happened. For a brief, disorienting moment, she wasn't sure if she was still dreaming, or if the world she had seen, the vast land, the ancient city, the voices of her ancestors, was just a vision, a figment of her imagination. But no. The stone in her hand was real, its smooth surface now dim and unremarkable, no longer pulsing with the warm energy it had held before. The whispers that had filled her ears only moments ago had faded into an eerie silence. She was back beneath the oak tree, its sprawling roots twisting deep into the earth, just as it had been when she had first touched the stone. The ancient tree loomed above her, its branches swaying slightly in the breeze. It looked exactly the same, but somehow, everything felt different. Leah slowly stood, her body still trembling from the intensity of the experience. The air around her felt charged, as though the very atmosphere was pulsing with energy. She could still feel the echo of the vision, the images of the vast land and the ancient city, the voices of the ancestors speaking to her, urging her forward. She could still hear their words, faint but clear in the back of her mind. "You are the last of your line. The blood of the ancients runs through you. The power of your ancestors is your birthright." She clenched the stone tighter, the words reverberating through her like a drumbeat. She didn't fully understand everything that had just happened, but one thing was clear. She had been chosen for something far greater than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just a girl living in a small village, without a father, with nothing but her mother's stories and the quiet, ordinary life she had always known. No, she was part of something vast, ancient, and powerful. Her ancestors had shown her a path that was now unfolding before her, waiting for her to walk it. Leah turned away from the oak tree, her mind racing with questions and emotions she couldn't fully process. She had to go back. She knew that much. She had to return to her home, to her mother. But even as she made her way back through the forest, her feet moving on autopilot, she could feel the change in the air. Everything felt different. The forest that had always seemed so familiar now felt new, as though she were seeing it with new eyes. The rustling leaves, the whispering wind, the sound of birds singing overhead, all of it seemed to hum with energy, as though the world itself was alive with purpose. When Leah finally returned to her home, she felt a deep, strange sense of disconnection. The house, which had once felt like her sanctuary, now felt like a place she didn't fully belong. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the quiet hallways, but everything seemed distant. Her mother's soft voice calling from the kitchen, the familiar scent of herbs and wood smoke in the air. None of it felt quite as comforting as it once had. It was as though the world she had known had suddenly shifted, leaving her standing on the edge of something new, something unknown. Her mother looked up from the stove, her warm smile spreading across her face as she saw Leah enter. But when she saw the expression on her daughter's face, her smile faltered slightly, her brow furrowing in concern. "Leah, you're back so soon. Everything all right?" Leah blinked, trying to shake the sense of disorientation that had settled over her. Her mother's voice was grounding, familiar, but it felt as though she were hearing it from a distance, as though the space between them had grown somehow. Leah didn't answer right away. She wasn't sure how to explain what had just happened to her, how to describe the visions, the voices, the overwhelming sense of power and destiny that now pulsed through her. Her mother had always spoken in riddles, hinting at things in the past, but she had never explained the full truth. How could she possibly understand what Leah was experiencing now? "I'm fine," Leah said softly, her voice carrying a weight she hadn't expected. "I just need some time to think." "It's agents." Her mother studied her for a long moment, her expression softening as if sensing the turbulence within her daughter. Leah had always been the quiet one, the one who kept her thoughts to herself, and her mother knew better than to press her when she wasn't ready to talk. She nodded slowly and returned to the stove, but Leah could feel her gaze lingering on her, full of silent questions. Leah stepped out into the garden, the cool breeze stirring the flowers and leaves around her. She needed space, she needed to think. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, each one building on top of the other, demanding answers. The stone, the whispers, the visions, they were all part of something much larger than she had ever realized. But what? What was her role in all of this? What was the path that was unfolding before her? The garden was quiet. The only sound, the gentle rustling of the trees and the distant hum of insects in the air. Leah closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. The connection to her ancestors felt so real, so tangible, as if she could reach out and touch it. But the path ahead wasn't clear. She wasn't sure where it would lead, or what challenges she would face along the way. All she knew was that she had to walk it, no matter how uncertain the road seemed. Her thoughts drifted back to the moment she had stood before the great city in her vision, the towering spires rising toward the sky, the sense of history and power that had filled her. The city, her ancestors' city, held the key to the truth. It was where she would learn to harness the power that was now awakening inside her. But getting there, she knew, would not be easy. The road was long, and it was filled with unknowns. She couldn't go back to the life she had known, to the safety of her small world. She was no longer that girl. The whispers, the stone, they had shown her that. They had shown her her true purpose. And yet, as she stood in the garden, looking out over the familiar landscape, a deep longing stirred inside her. A longing for the comfort of home, for the life she had once known. But she knew, with a certainty that filled her chest like a drumbeat, that she couldn't stay here. Not anymore. The world had changed. She had changed. Leah turned away from the garden and walked back into the house, her steps more purposeful than they had ever been before. Her mother was still at the stove, but Leah barely noticed her now. She had made her decision. It was time to leave, time to step into the unknown and embrace the path that was unfolding before her. She would find the city, she would learn from her ancestors, and she would claim the power that was her birthright. The whispers had shown her the way, and she would follow, no matter where it led. Her heart was racing with excitement and fear. But there was something else, a quiet, unshakable sense of purpose. She had found the truth about herself. Now, she had to walk the path. The world had shifted, and so had she. The journey was just beginning, and Leah was ready. The days that followed the awakening beneath the oak tree were filled with an unsettling restlessness. Though the whispers had fallen silent, the stone in Leah's hand remained warm, its faint glow a steady reminder of the task before her. It pulsed gently, as though it were waiting, urging her to take the next step. But what was that step? What exactly was she supposed to do with the power that was slowly growing within her? The questions lingered, unanswered, leaving her with a sense of urgency that refused to dissipate. Leah tried to go about her days as normally as possible, though everything felt different. The world seemed more vivid, more alive, but also more pressing. She felt as though the very earth beneath her feet was calling her, and the weight of her newfound purpose hung heavily on her chest. She meditated each evening, trying to center herself, to understand the whispers, to decipher the stone's power and the path it was leading her toward. One evening, as the last remnants of sunlight faded from the sky, she sat cross-legged in her room, the stone resting in her lap. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting her mind settle into stillness. The stone pulsed once more, and for the first time in days, the whispers returned not as a distant hum, but as clear, as though they were right beside her. "Prepare yourself, Leah. You have been chosen." The voice was familiar, like the deep echo of an ancient drum. The sound reverberated in her chest, making her heart beat faster, her breath quicken. She felt a shift in the air around her. A pull then. In an instant, the room around her vanished. The stone was still in her hand, but everything else had dissolved into nothingness. Leah stood, but the ground beneath her was no longer familiar. She was no longer in her room, nor in the forest, but in a place that felt older than time itself. The air was thick with a strange energy, and the space around her hummed with a power she had never known. In the distance, she saw figures approaching, draped in cloaks of light. Their faces were obscured, as if the light itself was a barrier, keeping them from view. These beings were unlike any she had ever seen, their presence both serene and intimidating, radiating an ancient, otherworldly power. Leah's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood firm, the stone still warm in her hand. She felt it a deep connection, as though these figures were not strangers, but part of her lineage, part of the history that had been passed down to her. These were the guardians, the protectors of the ancient ways. The largest figure, standing at the front of the group, stepped forward. The glow of light around them seemed to dim, revealing a tall, imposing figure. Their face still obscured, but their voice strong and clear. It was a voice that filled the space around her, resonating deeply, shaking the very air. "You have been chosen, Leah," the figure said, the words carrying a weight that made her knees want to buckle, though she stayed standing. "The blood of your ancestors runs through you. The stone you hold is the key to your true power. But before you can claim your heritage, you must prove your worth." Leah felt a chill run through her, but she didn't flinch. She had known, deep down, that the path before her wouldn't be easy. She had to earn this power. She had to prove herself worthy of the legacy that had been passed down through generations. Her fingers tightened around the stone, its warmth and pulse steadying her. The guardians moved closer, their eyes, if they could be called eyes, for their faces were still hidden in the glow, watching her with a quiet intensity. There was no judgment in their gaze, only a silent expectation. And in that moment, Leah understood. These were not just figures of power. They were teachers, guides who would help her unlock the truth of who she was and what she could become. "We will test you," the leader continued, their voice rich with authority. "You will face trials of strength, wisdom, and courage. These trials will push you to your limits, both physically and mentally. You will be tested, but you will not face them alone. The power of your ancestors is within you, Leah. You only need to learn to call upon it." Leah swallowed hard. Strength, wisdom, courage. These were qualities she had always admired, but never thought she could embody. She was just a girl from a quiet village, living a life defined by loss, by questions about who she was. But now, standing before the Guardians, she understood that those questions had answers, and they were within her reach. "Do you accept the challenge, Leah?" the leader asked, their tone both demanding and inviting, as if this moment had been waiting for her to answer. Leah took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had no choice but to accept. She had no choice but to embrace the power within her, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. This was her path, the one that had been laid out for her from the moment the stone had first come into her hands. And now, it was time to walk it. "I accept," Leah said, her voice steady despite the chaos she felt inside. She could feel the stone growing warmer, as if responding to her decision, to the commitment she had just made. The Guardians nodded as one, and the air around her shifted again. The landscape morphed, and suddenly, Leah found herself standing at the base of a steep, rocky mountain. The wind howled around her, and the sky was a dark, foreboding shade of gray. The mountain loomed before her, its peak hidden in swirling clouds. "This is your first trial," the leader's voice echoed, though no one was standing near her now. "Climb to the top of the mountain. The journey will test your strength, both physical and mental. Only those who have the resolve to face their inner fears will succeed." Leah looked up at the mountain, the path winding upward, steep and treacherous. She could see no clear way to the top. The mountain itself seemed to shift and change as she gazed at it, a living thing that tested every inch of her resolve. The whispers of the ancestors returned, swirling around her like a soft wind. "You are strong, Leah. You can do this. Trust yourself. Trust the power inside you." Her heart raced as she began to climb, her hands and feet scrabbling against the rock. The path was steep, and the wind was unrelenting, pushing against her, trying to force her back. Every time she thought she might slip, the whispers guided her, telling her where to place her hands, where to step. She was not alone. The power of her ancestors was with her. In every breath, every movement. Hours passed, though they felt like days. Her muscles ached, and the cold wind gnawed at her skin, but she refused to stop. With each step, she felt the stone in her hand grow warmer, its pulse in sync with her own heartbeat. The mountain was a trial, but it was also a revelation. With every challenge, every difficulty, she learned to draw on the strength within her. It wasn't just physical strength. It was a deeper power, a power that surged from the core of her being, from the legacy that had been passed down through generations. Finally, as the last rays of light disappeared behind the peak, Leah reached the summit. Her breath was ragged, her body exhausted, but a deep sense of fulfillment washed over her. She had done it. She had faced the trial and succeeded. The whispers, now clearer than ever, spoke to her. "Well done, Leah. You have proven your strength. But the trials are not over. There is more you must face. Trust in yourself, and the path will reveal itself." Leah stood at the peak of the mountain, her body trembling with exhaustion but her spirit alight with the knowledge that she had taken the first step on the journey that would define her. The power of her ancestors had guided her, and she knew that as long as she continued to trust in herself, she would be able to face whatever trials lay ahead. As the winds whispered around her, Leah felt the stone pulse once more in her hand, stronger now, like a heartbeat that was not her own but the heartbeat of all those who had come before her. She was no longer just a girl lost in a world she didn't understand. She was a part of something far greater. The path had begun to unfold, and there was no turning back now. The trials of strength, wisdom, and courage had only just begun. But Leah was ready. Leah's trials, though taxing and grueling, were not the only tests she faced. As she pushed deeper into the ancient power that flowed through her veins, the trials began to uncover truths that were darker, more painful than she had ever anticipated. What had once been a journey of empowerment slowly morphed into something much more complex. A journey not just of strength and wisdom, but of emotional reckoning. Each night, As the whispers returned, they began to peel back the layers of her lineage, revealing more than she had ever been told. The stone's pulse in her hand grew stronger, guiding her deeper into the mysteries of her past. At first, the visions were of ancient warriors, of priests and priestesses who wielded the power of the earth itself, leading their people with honor. But as Leah's connection to her ancestors deepened, so too did the truths they revealed, truths that would shake her to her very core. One evening, as she meditated by the still waters of a hidden pond, the stone pulsed with an intense, almost painful energy. The whispers returned, louder than ever before, as if the air itself had been charged with their presence. They were not the gentle, soothing voices she had grown used to. These voices were sharp, tinged with sorrow and grief. "Leah," they called to her, their tone somber. "There is something you must know." Leah's heart quickened, a sense of dread creeping into her chest. She had felt this pull before, the familiar tug that led her toward truths she wasn't ready to confront. But this time, the whispers held an edge of urgency that sent a shiver through her. She closed her eyes and took a steadying breath, bracing herself. "Your father," the voice continued, "was not the man you believed him to be. He betrayed us." The words hit Leah like a punch to the gut. Betrayed them? Her father? The man who had been nothing but a shadow in her life, a name spoken only in quiet, reverent tones by her mother? The man whose absence had haunted her since childhood, leaving only fragments of stories and unanswered questions. Her heart raced as she struggled to comprehend what the whispers were telling her. Betrayal. It was a word that echoed in her mind, reverberating with a pain she hadn't known was there. Betrayed by whom? By what? The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. But it was a truth she was afraid to face. Her father, was he really a traitor? Was that why he had vanished? Why he had been kept in the shadows, spoken of only in sorrowful, hushed tones? The stone in her hand grew warmer, its pulse quickening as if it were urging her to keep going, to dive deeper into the truth. But Leah hesitated. Her mind swirled with conflicting emotions. Her father, her unknown father, had never been part of her life. He was a mystery, a figure who loomed large in her mind as a distant, almost mythical presence. And now, the whispers were telling her he had betrayed the very people who had entrusted their power to him. The betrayal was a wound she hadn't expected to find, and it felt like a part of her soul had been torn open. She sat there, her thoughts spiraling, her heart heavy with a grief she hadn't known she was capable of. She had wanted answers, yes, but this was more than she had ever anticipated. The whispers continued to fill the air around her, their voice filled with sorrow, but also with something else, something soft, almost comforting. "You must understand, Leah. The betrayal was not your father's alone. He was deceived, manipulated by forces greater than himself. But in the end, it was his choice to betray us, to turn away from the path we had set before him." Leah's chest tightened at the words. A choice. Her father had made a choice to betray his people. She had always assumed that the absence of her father had been a kind of tragedy, a loss that had left a void in her life. But now, it felt as though that void was filled with something darker, a truth she had never been ready to face. "But how could he?" Leah whispered to the still air. The stone pulsed once more, its energy vibrating in the air around her. The whispers softened, growing gentler now, as if to reassure her. "Leah," the voice said, "your father was not a villain. He was a man who faced a choice, a terrible choice. He made mistakes, yes, but it is not too late for you to understand the full story. It is not too late for healing, for forgiveness." Healing, forgiveness. These words, simple words, yet they seemed impossibly distant. How could she forgive a man she had never truly known? A man who had betrayed the very people who had trusted him with their power. How could she heal from the wound that had been opened so unexpectedly? Leah's hands trembled as she held the stone. The whispers were no longer filled with anger or sorrow. They had softened into something else, something like an invitation. They were offering her something. A choice just as her father had faced. She could hold on to the anger, the pain, and let it consume her. Or she could embrace the possibility of forgiveness, of understanding. She could choose to walk down a path of healing, not just for herself, but for the legacy of her father. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on her. What did it mean to forgive someone who had hurt so many? To forgive someone who had turned his back on the very things that had given him life. But then, she remembered the stories her mother had told her. The stories of the ancestors of warriors who had faced unimaginable challenges, of healers who had mended broken spirits. The power of her ancestors was not just in their strength, but in their ability to heal, to rise above the pain and the betrayal. If she was truly to walk in their footsteps, she would have to find a way to do the same. Embrace the pain, Leah, the whispers urged gently. Face it head on, and it will lose its power over you. Her mind swirled with the complexity of it all. The betrayal, the loss, the path of healing and forgiveness. Her father was gone, but his choices had shaped her life, had shaped her very identity. She could not undo the past, no matter how much she longed to, but she could choose to forgive him, to let go of the anger that threatened to consume her. She could choose to honor her ancestors, not by clinging to their pain, but by learning from it, by understanding it, and choosing to rise above it. Leah took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling over her like a heavy cloak. She knew what she had to do. She could not change the past, but she could choose how she would move forward. With the stone in her hand, she stood up and faced the empty space around her. The whispers had shown her the way, not the easy way, but the only way. The path of healing was not one of forgetting, but of understanding, of facing the pain and choosing to grow from it. The stone pulsed one last time, its warmth filling her chest, and in that moment, Leah knew. She had made her choice. The path before her was unclear, but she would walk it with courage. She would find peace not in the absence of pain, but in the strength to face it. And with that, Leah stepped forward, leaving behind the darkness of betrayal and embracing the light of forgiveness and healing. Leah sat alone beneath the heavy canopy of trees, the moonlight filtering through the branches above her, casting long shadows across the forest floor. It was a place she had come to know intimately over the past weeks, this quiet, secluded part of the woods where the whispers of her ancestors had first spoken to her, guiding her through the trials, the revelations, and the painful truths about her past. But tonight, the silence was different. The air was thick, heavy with anticipation, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The whispers had stopped for a time, and in their absence, Leah felt an unsettling stillness. The weight of everything she had uncovered pressed down on her like a storm cloud. Her father's betrayal, the truth of her lineage, the power that ran through her veins, and the responsibility it carried. It had all led to this moment, this final step. She had spent days questioning herself, questioning everything she thought she knew about her family, about the legacy she was meant to inherit. The pain of her father's choices still lingered in her heart, but she had come to understand that it was not a wound to be healed, but a part of the story that had shaped her. The betrayal had left scars, yes, but it had also shown her something vital: the strength to confront the darkness, to rise above it, and to claim the power that was rightfully hers. In the deepest part of her soul, Leah knew that she could not change the past. No amount of wishing, no amount of regret could undo what had been done. Her father's actions, his decisions, had carved a path that had led her here, and while she could not erase the pain, she could choose what came next. She could shape the future. She could decide how she would carry forward the legacy that had been passed down through generations of warriors, healers, and protectors. The whispers had shown her that she was the last of her line, the one who would inherit the power of her ancestors. And now, she had to make the choice. How would she wield that power? Leah stood slowly, her fingers curling around the stone that rested in her palm. The stone had always been more than just an object. It was a conduit to something greater, something ancient. And now, as she held it, she felt the energy surge within her, a warm current of power that pulsed with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. It was as though the stone had become an extension of herself, a physical manifestation of the connection she had forged with her ancestors. The air around her seemed to crackle with that energy, and she felt a sudden surge of clarity and understanding that had eluded her before. The whispers returned, softer now, but full of urgency, as though they were calling her towards something she could not yet see. They spoke not in riddles this time, but with a single, clear message. "It is time, Leah. Take the final step." The words echoed in her mind, and she knew, without question, what she had to do. She had to embrace the power within her. She had to step into the role she was destined for, to face the legacy of her ancestors, both the light and the darkness, and claim her place among them. She could not remain in the shadows of the past any longer. The stone, the power of her bloodline, had led her to this moment, and now she had to trust in it. She had to trust in herself. The stone in her hand began to glow brighter, its light casting a golden halo around her, illuminating the darkness of the forest. The ground beneath her feet hummed with energy, the earth seeming to pulse in time with the beating of her heart. Leah closed her eyes, letting the light of the stone fill her senses. She could feel the presence of her ancestors surrounding her, their voices swirling in the air like a soft wind, guiding her, urging her forward. For a moment, the weight of it all threatened to overwhelm her. The responsibility, the power, the pain of the past, it was all there, pressing in on her. But she held firm. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. She had faced the darkness, the pain of betrayal, and now she had to face the final trial, the trial of her own strength, her own will. The stone's glow intensified, flooding her vision with light. She felt the power surging through her, a torrent of energy that threatened to overwhelm her senses. It was as though the stone was alive, as though it was awakening something deep within her, something ancient, something she had only begun to understand. The whispers rose to a crescendo, their voices blending into one unified call. "It is time, Leah. You are ready." Leah's breath quickened, her pulse racing. The power surged within her, filling her body with a warmth that spread from her chest to her fingertips, from her heart to her soul. She could feel the energy of her ancestors, their strength, their wisdom, flowing through her veins, merging with her own. She could feel the weight of their legacy, their expectations. But she also felt something else: freedom. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just a girl burdened by the past. She was the embodiment of everything that had come before her, the culmination of her bloodline's history, their struggles, and their triumphs. And now, it was her turn to forge the future. With a deep breath, Leah opened her eyes. The world around her had changed. The forest was no longer dark and oppressive. It was alive, bathed in the radiant light of the stone. The trees seemed to bow in reverence, the wind whispering in approval. Everything had shifted, as though the entire world was waiting for her to take this final step. The whispers grew softer, their tone now one of affirmation, as if they were pleased with the path she had chosen. "You have claimed your heritage, Leah. You have embraced the power within you. The future is yours to shape." Leah's heart swelled with a mixture of emotions: relief, determination, and a deep sense of purpose. The journey had been long and painful, but she had come through it stronger, more certain of who she was and what she was meant to do. The legacy of her ancestors was not just a burden, it was a gift, a power she could use to protect the world, to heal the wounds of the past, and to ensure that the mistakes of those who had gone before her would not be repeated. She could feel the power of the stone pulsing in her hand, still warm and vibrant, a constant reminder of the journey that had led her here. She had faced the darkness of betrayal, the truth of her lineage, and had emerged stronger for it. Now, the stone was no longer just a tool. It was a part of her, a manifestation of the strength that flowed through her veins. The light around her intensified, and for a moment, Leah felt as though she were no longer alone. The voices of her ancestors were all around her, their presence solid and strong, as though they were standing beside her, guiding her every step. She could feel their pride, their love, and their hope for the future. And in that moment, Leah knew that she was ready. She had found clarity in the darkness, and with the power of her ancestors behind her, she was ready to face whatever came next. The whispers faded, but the stone's glow remained, a steady beacon in the night. Leah took one last deep breath and stepped forward, knowing that the future was hers to shape. The path ahead was still unclear, but she was no longer afraid. She had the power, the strength, and the wisdom of her ancestors within her, and she would use it to protect the world, to honor the legacy they had left her, and to forge a new future. With that, Leah walked forward into the unknown, the light of the stone guiding her every step. Her heart filled with the certainty that she was ready for whatever came next. The whispers of the past had led her here, and now it was time for her to shape the future. The city stood before her, its gates open. Inside, she would find the truth about her father, her heritage, and her purpose. But the choice was hers. Would she embrace the power of her ancestors, or would she walk away from it all? Leah took a deep breath and stepped forward. Inside the city, Leah uncovered the full story of her lineage. Her father had not been a traitor, he had been deceived, forced into a terrible choice. The true enemy was a dark force that had sought to destroy her family's legacy. Leah was the last hope for her people, and her destiny was to protect the ancient power that had been passed down through generations. With newfound strength, Leah reclaimed her heritage. The whispers had not been a burden, they had been a gift, guiding her back to who she truly was. Leah stood atop a mountain, the wind sweeping through her hair. The whispers had faded, but she could still feel their presence within her. She was no longer just a girl with a strange gift. She was a protector, a guardian, a keeper of the ancient wisdom. Her journey had only just begun, and the future lay open before her. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Leah's story, and join us as we explore the depths of ancient wisdom, family legacies, and the power of identity. The whispers will continue, and so will the adventure.